What if I told you the loudest cheer in Denver on Thursday night was for a punt that barely left the turf? Picture that. A packed stadium, wind peeling at the banners, and the most dramatic moment, a half-hearted punt and a missed field goal. It sounds like a joke, but tonight's game felt like a weird, beautiful joke that somehow ended with the Broncos walking off with a win. You could feel the weather in every play. The wind wasn't a subplot. It was a character. It messed with punts, ruined timing, and made quarterbacks look like they were throwing through molasses. Both offenses arrived ready to perform and left the stage apologizing. But football is simple in its cruelty. If you can stop the other team more than they stop you, the scoreboard eventually obliges. The Broncos did just enough. The Raiders did just enough poorly. The final line, 10-7, reads like a typo, but it was painfully real. Early on, it felt like a study in missed opportunities. Las Vegas scored first when Ashton Janty found the end zone, a short burst that put the visitors on the board and forced Denver to chase momentum. The Broncos answered with a Troy Franklin touchdown in the second quarter, but the game never got into a rhythm after that. The first half was a staccato of 3-and-outs, muffed punts, and sacks. By halftime, you weren't watching two professional teams so much as two weather-beaten crews trying to get the job done on a bad set. Geno Smith looked like he was fighting the elements and, at times, the turf. 5 sacks in the first half, 6 by the end of the night. Hits that weren't always highlight reel violent, but cumulative. Little punches that add up to a man who is less a precision instrument and more a human weather vane. You could see him limping late, a toughness that kept him in the game after a fourth quarter tackle, but his mobility was compromised and the offense suffered. And then there was the Broncos' trick play that read like someone trying to conjure fireworks in a fog. A backward lateral to Cortland Sutton, who, in the moment, tried to be a quarterback and found nothing but silence downfield. The play died in a sack. It wasn't clever. It was desperate theater. The kind of move you roll out of when normal football isn't doing the job. Willutz's failed 59-yard attempt immediately afterward felt like the punchline. The crowd booed, the team shuffled, and the night kept trudging. What kept the Broncos alive wasn't artistry, it was defense. A unit that looked rusty at points this season came with teeth and held when it mattered. They turned near misses into turnovers and bad field position into breathing room. Dondrea Tillman's interception, a ball bouncing off a receiver's hands and into a waiting linebacker, felt like a gift from fate. It didn't produce points, but it produced the time the Broncos needed to keep the ball, chew the clock, and make each Raiders possession feel smaller and less meaningful. Las Vegas had one long, miserable stretch, 7 consecutive drives without a first down. That streak was a quiet horror show. It's one thing to lose yards, it's another to look like you forgot how to move the chains for a half of football. When the Raiders finally cracked that streak in the fourth quarter, you'd have thought they were breaking a curse. But football isn't about breaking curses. It's about seizing windows. And when their window opened late, they couldn't pop the ball through the glass. Daniel Carlson's miss wide right on the potential tying field goal was a thud you could feel in the stomachs of every Raider fan. That one kick decided the night. There's something almost poetic about wins like this. They're ugly. They make stat lines look like arithmetic errors. They don't give you highlight reels or glory days tweets. But there's a brutal efficiency to them. Defense forces mistakes. Mistakes shrink opportunities. Opportunities evaporate. The Broncos eked out a field goal in the second half and clung to it like it was a trophy. That's not flashy. It's practical. It's the kind of thing that keeps seasons alive while headline writers grumble about the product on the field. You can name all the things that went wrong: punts that were barely kicked, trick plays that backfired, drops, missed field goals, and a quarterback who took 6 sacks. But the deeper story is about identity. The Broncos didn't win by reimagining their offense. They won because their defense remembered how to be a unit when the offense couldn't. That's a lesson teams forget when they chase glamour. Sometimes wins are built on muscle memory and stubbornness, not genius. And for the Raiders, tonight is a night to examine and then swallow hard. When your offense goes 2 full quarters without a first down, the questions are structural. Is the play calling conservative to a fault? Are the linemen failing to create movement? Is the offense's confidence cracked after a few bad bounces? These are more than coaching rubrics. They are the kind of fractures that, if left untreated, widen into losing streaks. The loss doesn't have the drama of a fluke. It has the weight of an offense that simply didn't show up. There's also the human element, the small scenes that don't make the box score but define the night. Fans booing not in anger so much as disappointment, players jogging off the field with clenched jaws, the kicker staring at the uprights after a miss, knowing he let his team down in a place where second chances are rare. These nights test teams' character more than their physical skill. How a locker room processes this will tell you more about their future than any stat line. And yet, amid all that ugliness, there's a sliver of mercy in the final score. Denver is now 8-2. That record doesn't lie. It's a sum of results, not aesthetics. Wins accumulate and matter. Coaches and general managers will care less about how points were scored than the small ledger that ultimately decides playoff seeding. The Broncos got the number they needed. The Raiders did not. That's the bottom line. If you're searching for a narrative, find it in the stubbornness. The defensive lineman who refused to yield, the linebacker who caught a tipped ball, the kicker who missed and had to look up at a scoreboard that showed what felt impossible: a win. Football in its purest form is ugly and honest. It's a merciless teacher that rewards toughness and punishes showiness when the conditions are against you. Tonight's lesson was plain. When the weather robs you of rhythm, the team that makes fewer critical mistakes walks off smiling. So yes, this was a game to forget for anyone who came looking for poetry. But for the Broncos, it was a night that proved one thing. When the offense runs out of answers, a defense with appetite can still find a path. The final image is simple and stubborn. The clock hits 0, the scoreboard says 10-7, and a city gets to breathe. In the end, ugly keeps you alive, and that in football can sometimes be enough. You ever sit through a game where the scoreboard is trying to be polite, "We'll keep this civil, thanks," while everything happening on the field screams chaos? That was Denver versus Las Vegas on Thursday. A windy night, 2 sputtering offenses, 5 sacks for Geno in the first half, 6 for the game, and a game that felt like someone hit low energy on both teams. By the end, it was 10-7 Denver, a win that looked prettier on paper than it felt in the stands. Reuters, start with the obvious. The Broncos won, they're 8-2, and their defense bailed them out, again. This wasn't a masterclass in offensive creativity. It was trench warfare, sloppy plays, and 2 units that refused to let each other breathe. Jeremy Crawshaw's punting had the crowd holding their breath, offensive drives stalled out repeatedly, and special teams gifted and stole pivotal moments. The one thing that decided the night was Denver's ability to turn chaos into a single decisive advantage. A blocked punt turned into field goal range, and Will Lutz knocked down a 32-yarder that proved to be the game winner. Defense set up the win. Period. Reuters. Let's talk Geno Smith, because this is where the smothered headline comes from. He was hit, hurried, and ruffled all night. The Broncos' front kept finding angles, sacks and waves, pressure up the middle, stunts that left Las Vegas's offensive line looking like a pickup group trying to find a rhythm. Smith absorbed 6 sacks by game's end, and when that happens, the offense loses its timing, routes break down, and everything that used to be dependable becomes a negotiation. 2 of those first half sacks were tone setters. From that point on, the Raiders were chasing a game they couldn't quite reach. If you want a single play that encapsulates this mess, watch the sequence where a Raiders drive sputtered into a tipped ball, Dondrea Tillman scooped it, and ripped off a return that flipped field position. That takeaway didn't come from offensive brilliance. It came from a defense that won the small, ugly battles. Hand placement, reading the arc, hustle to the ball. Plays like that make tidy victory drives out of sloppy nights, and Denver's defense practically stitched the whole thing together with hustle and discipline. The team's highlight reel tonight was less wow and more wrench the momentum. DenverBroncos.com. The offenses, though, good grief. Bo Nix and the Broncos unit moved enough to tease a rhythm, but penalties, dropped catches, and the mile-high wind turned potential scoring drives into whistled opportunities. The Raiders, meanwhile, had an early spark,